Hi everyone, welcome back. It's amazing how fast time flies when we let you outside to have some fun or you get to down tools for a minute. That just went like this. Doesn't feel like 30 minutes at all. Now, this session is a little bit different to session one. We have a range of speakers who come from their varying backgrounds of either being scientists, practitioners, and they're all brought together under one really core theme, and that really is how can we improve how we're engaging community. If we've got a problem, like something that we're out challenging, working towards, you did hear the word koala a lot this morning, but whatever your problem is, if it's changing the way people travel, if it's improving health and well-being, these same principles apply right across any of those challenges you're actually working on. So with no further ado, we have our New Zealand speakers up next, Anne-Marie Kennedy and Janine Williams.
Make sure. Hi everyone, so I'm Anne-Marie Kennedy. I'm an Associate Professor at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, and I have here Dr. Janine Williams. She's my co-author on this piece. There we go. Oh no, one back. Before we get to that. So we're really excited to present this piece of research to you today. It's really new. We've literally just submitted the information to a journal maybe 2 days ago or 3 days ago. So you are the first to hear it in the world. So we hope that you enjoy it. And I think the key thing to take away with it is we're hopefully going to give you some information about how you can create effective, humorous social advertising that actually works. So we were really inspired about this topic when an advert came out in New Zealand in 2011, which came from the New Zealand Transport Agency, and it was called Ghost Chips. You might be familiar with it. I'm going to show it to you in a minute in case you aren't, but we all love it. And this advert, not only was it funny and everybody enjoyed it, one of the amazing things about it is how effective it was. So in the following reports after the advert was released and the campaign happened, they saw a 50% drop in drink driving offences for teenagers, which was the target market. So an amazingly effective piece of advertising. So we'll show you the ad now. I'll get out the way, although I'm very short, so it probably doesn't matter. But I'll show you the advert and then we'll talk about it in a sec.
Oh no, George is driving. He's too wasted. I should say something, but I could look dumb in front of Monique. Bro, Monique says you're dumb, but if he crashes, I'll have to live with his family.
Puzzle time.
And if he dies, Ghost George will haunt me forever.
Grab a chip. Want a chip?
You know I can't grab your ghost chips.
Go away.
Spoon.
Spacehead. Bro, what are you doing, bro?
Oh, I've been internalising a really complicated situation in my head.
What are you on about?
I don't think you should drive.
Nah.
No, you're too drunk, bro. Just crash here.
Yeah, it's crash here. Okay.
Stop a mate from driving drunk. Legend.
Okay, so for people who weren't familiar with that, there is our Ghost Chips ad, which inspired us. So when this advert came out, it became absolutely viral in New Zealand, 2,500 hits on YouTube. It was actually released over TV, but the YouTube version, just in the week afterwards, or 2 weeks afterwards, had about 2,500 hits, 1 million hits. There were T-shirts made, there was Facebook pages made, there was a music video made, and I believe Ghost Chips is now in the Urban Dictionary. So we had, quite a big success with that. But the thing that really inspired me and made me interested in it is I actually saw it being used in the right situations to intervene with people drink driving. And so I have to actually put my stuff down to hand signals. But so someone picks up their keys at a party, they're about to drive home, they've been drinking, and then someone will walk up to them and go, puzzle time. And then everybody laughs and mocks them for doing a really bad, version of puzzle time. And they don't drink and drive home. They go, oh yeah, okay, I've been drinking. I won't drive home. And we were really interested in why this might work. And there's actually a theory out there, reader response theory, that might explain it, but when we started looking into this theory, we find there's only 2 studies that even say anything about it, and there's no measures. So there's no way for us to actually repeat this phenomenon. And in fact, it was tried, the same kind of structure of the ad was repeated, and it was with vastly different results. So the problem is, how can we recreate such a successful advert? So we started looking into the social advertising literature, and we found a few different things. You can see on here there's lots of highlighted words in bold, kind of saying that all the wonderful things that we know from humorous social advertising that developed. So, good attention, good attitude, good knowledge, decrease in counter-arguments. So what we see there, someone might say, oh, that won't happen to me. That's a counter-argument. So when they see a humorous social advertising, they then have less of those types of counter-arguments. So we know that humorous social advertising does work. It also reduces anxiety about changing. So we had this in a version. Humorous social advertising looking at breast self-examinations, it decreased anxiety around doing that behaviour. But the thing about it that's a problem is that all of this research shows the outcomes of the humorous social advertising. It doesn't explain why it actually works and how we can repeat it and create good social advertising that actually works, this humorous aspect. It also doesn't look at the intervener. No research looks at the intervener. All of the research looks at the drink driver. And if you think of your KPIs, right, and behaviour change, it's at the offender or whatever is that key behaviour. But a lot of our different behaviours we're trying to change actually happen in a social situation. So you think drink driving, you think excessive drinking, drug taking, using your phone while driving, right? Texting in a car. This could all happen in a social situation. So we often target at the intervener, stop your mate drink driving, yet there's no research on how this affects them. The other thing that is a problem is that we actually don't know how their sense of humour affects, so anybody's sense of humour affects the effectiveness of that humorous social advertising. That has also not been researched. So from this kind of literature review, we found out we don't know why humorous social advertising works. We don't know how to make humorous social advertising effective. And so therefore, when you're making these ads, it's just a stroke of luck as to whether they're actually effective. They might be funny, but do they lead to behaviour change? And so that wastes your money eventually, right? So what we want to do is make sure that humorous social advertising is actually effective. So what we've come up with is a new construct, and it's called comedic reproducibility. And the basic tenet of that is that if you can have something in the advert that is comedically reproducible, that it might be effective, and this is what our research has shown, that is the thing that makes it effective at driving behaviour change. And I'll leave it with Janine to carry on.
So this is our model, and there are 4 different types of humour styles that people have, and this essentially affects how they use humour. And 2 of these relate to the self, so self-enhancing humour and self-defeating humour, where you kind of put yourself down. But then there are 2 that relate to our interactions with others, and these are either affiliative humour or aggressive humour. So aggressive humour is quite negative and manipulative, so we didn't think that would be the most relevant here. But affiliative humour is actually where we use humour to form relationships, facilitate relationships, and interact with others. So that kind of humour style is really useful when you're trying to influence others' behaviour. So we hypothesised that if you are high in this affiliative humour, you would feel less anxious about intervening naturally, because you have a kind of a tool there yourself. You can interact with people, and research shows that in confrontational situations, these kinds of people can say the difficult things. So this was our first hypothesis, that they would feel less anxious about intervening. And then that would be associated with a perception that if they intervene, it's likely to be effective, and we know that that affects behaviour. So we hypothesise that that would then affect their intention to intervene. Now, how does this personality type relationship interact with the advertising? Well, if it's comedically reproducible, we hypothesise that that would actually reduce anxiety further, because it's giving people something they can use. So when they're in those situations, and that's what we observed with the marketing comms that we just looked at, they have something they can actually use. And so we hypothesised a moderating relationship. How did we do it? So, oops, sorry, is that right? Yep, sorry, that's right. Okay, so we recruited 278 young people aged 18 to 30 who participated in our study, and all the measures we used were established apart from comedic reproducibility, which we adapted from an existing scale to measure that new construct. We developed some ads which we pre-tested in terms of humorousness and also comedic reproducibility. And these are just 3 of them. People were only exposed to one, and we actually had an additional one that was very low in comedic reproducibility. You couldn't really use it. It was just a taxi saying, stop a friend drink driving, stop your mate drink driving. So these are the ads we used in our study. And all of our hypotheses were confirmed. So it's super interesting. We're really excited that this has occurred, and that this double mediation effect, which means that those 2 mechanisms, that reduced anxiety and that increased perception that intervening will be effective, did actually mediate between the humour style and the intention to intervene. So that was amazing, and we were really excited about that. And then also, comedic reproducibility did moderate the relationship with intervening anxiety. So this is just showing that on a graph. So you can see that as the ad was more comedically reproducible, we see lower levels of intervening anxiety. So we are very excited to present this to you today, because it's a really new finding.
So I'm just back to give you the key takeaways. Oh, yep, good, we're on there. So just the key takeaways for you to help you with your humorous social advertising. So I guess just to break down the findings into kind of everyday terms. So what we've found is, if you create an ad and it has a comedically reproducible aspect to it, then that helps people, it gives people fodder to use to intervene, right? Which decreases their anxiety because it makes them feel like it might work, okay? Response efficacy. So that's that model. So what that means for you, though, is 2 things. So 1, you should create advertising that has comedically reproducible aspects, right? And so that's that second point there. But what that means is pre-test, and in our work we've established a scale so that you can actually measure and pre-test whether you have a comedically reproducible element, right? So that's the first part. And the second key takeaway is to actually think about who you're targeting in a slightly different way. So if you segment your market, think about the offender and the intervener, right? And when you're segmenting, think about the type of intervener. So what we've found is that even though if you have this comedically reproducible aspect in your ad, everybody there is more likely to intervene, right? But what we found even more support for is that if someone has an affiliative humour style, so their sense of humour tends towards being affiliative, so kind of a nice humour style, as it were, nice person, humour style, then those people are even more likely to intervene. So when you segment your groups and your target groups, segmenting or targeting those with an affiliative humour style, which has a scale already associated. So again, these are things that aren't, beyond your means and resources. These scales are there so that you can really measure that and have really effective targeted social advertising, humorous social advertising. Cool, so hopefully we've given you some info today on how to create that effective social advertising, humorous social advertising, and we look forward to chatting with you in breaks and questions and things. So thank you.
So it's nice to hear first-hand science long before it even gets out there into that published sphere, to then get out to the lecturers who then one day can teach the next people. I think that's the advantage sometimes of standing there at the cutting edge. Questions are already coming in for Anne-Marie and Janine, so it's nice to see that sort of rolling through. Don't forget to post them in. I would like, with no further ado, to welcome our next speaker, who will talk in a slightly similar theme, Murooj Yousef. Would you mind coming down?
Thanks, Sharyn. Hi everyone, my name is Murooj and I am so excited to share with you today some of the insights of my research around emotions and actions and how we can utilize emotional appeals to make our campaigns more effective. And it's so refreshing to see some practical examples with Janine and Anne-Marie beforehand, and I think that's a great example that we can definitely follow. So my passion around emotions actually started quite early on because as a kid, we moved around a lot. Different countries have different languages, different communication styles, different accents, and it can take a lot for a teenager to fit in while learning all of these new things. But one thing that was always comforting is the universal language of emotions. Whether you are happy or sad or proud, you can always tell from the way that a person express their feelings in their body language or their facial expressions. And that's really unites us, and it's something that we know well as marketers as well. We know that from the evidence and from research, emotional appeals tend to work better in motivating people to take action and inducing behavior change than just factual or informational messages. Because information can raise awareness, it can raise or increase knowledge, but it does not necessarily take that step forward towards action and behavior change. But what emotion do we use to produce effective messages and get that persuasive outcome? It is quite confusing, and the research around it is very mixed, and that's what even neuroscience now tells us. It's a universe of emotions. There's so many different emotions that you can use in your messages. So my PhD and my research in the past 5 years was all around, so how can we make emotions, effective in our messages? How can we induce behavior change through online and offline by motivating people to take actions online and offline? So this is me in the beginning of the PhD, quite excited. I was like, I'm going to find this out. I'm going to find what emotion specifically works, and I'm going to answer the question. So I did a systematic literature review with the help of my supervisors, of course, and we looked at thousands and thousands of research papers that investigated the effectiveness of different emotional appeals. And I specifically then filtered these papers to look at those papers that investigated whether these emotional appeals had an effect on intentions and behavior, and analyzed these papers to see what they told us, what works. While the results show that positive appeals had a persuasive advantage, a slight persuasive advantage over negative appeals, there's still quite a big number of papers that showed mixed, inconclusive, or no difference in their results. And so that person in the photo that was excited and was going to find the answer now was taken aback, and I'm like, okay, I probably need to investigate a little bit further, especially because a lot of the research papers showed a weak study design. Some of the measures were not reliable or valid, so I had to kind of dig deeper to understand what the results were telling us. And also, I want to just point out The majority of these papers looked at fear versus humour, so neglecting a lot of other range of emotions that could actually yield an effective outcome. And similarly, there's a limitation in utilizing theory and also a limitation in understanding how these messages affect our behavior rather than just intentions to behave in a certain way. So when I looked at these mixed results in the literature and the different studies that looked at different emotional appeals, I found that it really depends on your audience. So, for example, males tend to respond favorably to positive emotional appeals rather than negative emotional appeals, while females prefer the opposite. If you're targeting young adults, then you might want to stay away from negative emotional appeals because that produce a reaction or a defensive reaction to the message, and they might even skip the message altogether or have a boomerang effect where they adopt the opposite behavior that you're trying to promote. And when your audience is already involved in the message and they have positive attitudes towards it, so if they already think drink driving is bad, or they already think that koalas need that support and we need to be aware of the threats around it, then negative appeals can actually work. So my research then started to examine how can we address the gaps in the research? So one of the things was we need to examine other emotional appeals beyond humor and fear. So I looked at hope and shame as well as co-active appeals, and that's the use of positive and negative emotional appeals together in one message. We also looked at how we can enhance data collection methods through valid and reliable measures. And to do that, we extracted data directly from social media rather than asking people what they will do or what they will engage with. And we also measured behavior by tracking online and offline actions, again, beyond self-report measures, so we see exactly what they're doing rather than asking them about it. And we utilized theoretical framework through utilizing the multi-actor engagement framework by Sharyn and colleagues, and we extended that framework as well. So the framework suggests that people move through 4 key levels of engagement on social media. They start with connection, which you can measure with reach. They move to interaction. That's where people are clicking, commenting, liking your message. And then they move towards loyalty, where they actually have repeated interactions with you. They are messaging your page. They are tagging other people in your message, in your campaign. And then the last level, which is advocacy, and that's when they start to share that message with their own network. I extended that framework to behavior, and that's where people are taking action, whether online or offline, as a result of your campaign. So to experiment with the framework and also with social media data, we looked at different advertising appeals. So we looked at shame and hope messages in one study. And then in the next study, we looked at positive, negative, and coactive appeals on Facebook to see what people are engaging with and what they're doing in reaction to these campaigns. And the context here was encouraging people to filter their donations before they send them to charities to help reduce the cost and time that charities spend in filtering these items. The result of the first study that compared hope and shame appeals on Facebook found that negative, or the shame ad, was in fact getting more engagement, was getting more clicks, more comments, more likes than the hope message. And it was also more cost effective, so we paid less per 1,000 impression compared to the hope message. But the question was, so that's just engagement. What are people doing as a result of the campaign on our website? So the next study, which looked at the coactive appeals as well, looked at actions beyond social media. So we tracked those people who clicked and went to the website. What actions were they taking? And we found that, again, the negative advertisement got more engagement and it got more actions than the positive and coactive messages. So this got us thinking, All right, this is all online. What about offline? What are people doing beyond seeing the ad online and beyond visiting our website? And how can we track that action offline? I mean, if you have a store, you can always track your sales, for example, after a campaign, but with social marketing is a little bit different. And at this stage, the pandemic happened, and I decided, I've got the context to study because there's vaccination uptake, and we've got data on that. We can see exactly who's, getting vaccinated and how much that number is going up. But I wanted to see how is sentiment affecting that action. So how is the public sentiment, positive, negative, or neutral, relating or correlating with our action to get vaccinated? So I analyzed 138,000 tweets in 2021 and looked at how are people sentiment or the public sentiment changing in the different stages of the vaccination rollout. And you might remember these campaigns last year. The government rolled out a few vaccination messages and campaigns, and some of them were factual. In the middle of the year was more negative, and then towards the end of the year it was more positive, with messaging of get vaccinated and you can get your freedom back. So we looked at how these public health campaigns, along with other events like lockdown and mandates and the accessibility and the availability of the vaccine, affected people's sentiment, and how did that sentiment then correlate with people's vaccination uptake. So through the sentiment analysis we did, you can see here that negative sentiment was dominating, followed by neutral and then positive sentiment. And you can see that different events caused negative sentiment to kind of peak, while other events like Pfizer doses arriving in Sydney or the approval of certain vaccine to certain age groups had the positive emotion going up and the negative emotions coming down. Now, while this chart shows a lot of fluctuating, have a look here at the vaccination uptake was only going up. So the number of doses taken was just increasing during 2021. So how come people were tweeting negatively and talking negatively about the vaccine, but they were still getting vaccinated? That was a bit surprising. And the correlation actually shows that. It shows that even though people were talking more negatively online about the vaccine, they were still going and getting the action done. They were still getting vaccinated. So what happened there? So to understand, we did an LDA topic modeling and basically identified certain themes in our tweets. And we found that the majority of these tweets are actually talking about the vaccination rollout rather than the vaccine itself. So people were frustrated with the low accessibility and availability of the vaccine, or they were frustrated with certain mixed messaging or not being able to book a time to get the vaccine and all of that. So what this tells us is that while emotions do have the power to persuade people and get them to take action, emotions on their own are not enough. You need to have your logistics in place. You can't tell people to go buy a product when the product is not there, right? So you really need to have your channels sorted before you go and build a campaign. No matter how effective that campaign is, if they can't take action, people will be frustrated, people will be angry, and they will sure be tweeting about it. So I guess key takeaways from my presentation is that to keep testing your ads and see how people react to it. We've got access to social media, which enables any one of us to run A/B testing with some budget. You can see how people are reacting to your ads and what works and what doesn't work. One of the key also messages is that to match the platform vibe. So my studies looked into Facebook and Twitter, which are more towards the negative spectrum of social media ads, while Instagram, Snapchat, or TikTok are more positive. So you want to match the vibes of the platform. Also know your audience, what age group you're talking to, what are their attitudes, what gender, all of that helps you to determine which emotional appeal works. Timing. Make sure your logistics are in place. If the campaign is ill-timed, it can be really not received well. And utilize real data, utilize the social media measures that you can get. Follow some practical frameworks like the multi-actor engagement framework to help you see the effectiveness in each level of the engagement framework. And you can track actions, whether it's on your website or it's on your social media, and you can easily see with numbers what is working and what is not working. That's it from me. Thank you so much, and connect with me on LinkedIn to see what I'm up to.
Thank you so much, Murooj. She has been a very, very productive PhD student during her time studying, looking right across the spectrum of how to actually watch, learn, but also then to move fast. Now, linked to that theme would be our next speaker. So if I could invite Yannick van Hierden to the stage, please.
Thank you. Oh, do you want to say something, people? Put your questions in. I'd like to speak about what really works. And I'd like to start with a quote. And the quote is, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half." This quote by our friend John Wanamaker here on the screen clearly expresses the difficulties of quantifying the effectiveness of promotion. And in 2021 alone, we have seen a global ad spend of $700 billion. Now, considering this astronomical amount, we know that advertising is effective. We just don't really know when, where, and how it works. Now, the literature also demonstrates that promotion strongly influences any behavior change campaign or program. But how do we really figure out what works? You know, if there is no promotion, then there's no engagement. And then if there's no engagement, then there's no change. So can I see a show of hands of who of you tries to create awareness or promote a product, a program, an idea, a behavior, a service? Please, show of hands. Almost all of you. So the next 10 minutes are going to be really critical to the work that you are doing. Now, in my PhD, I discovered that a lot of professionals and academics struggle to quantify or measure the cost effectiveness of what they're doing. And that's a problem. Because in a world where we are heavily reliant on funding from government, philanthropic organizations, academic institutions, or the industry, it is really critical that we are able to demonstrate cost effectiveness. Because if what we are doing is not cost effective, it's not sustainable. And if we want to create positive change on the people and the planet, the work that we do must be sustainable. Now, whenever we are creating change, we must ask ourselves a few questions. What does this cost us? What does it deliver? Is it working? Is this a good way to spend our money, or is this money or energy wasted? And I was challenged with these same questions when I launched the well-being program Elevate Self-Growth, which I developed in my PhD. And it is a well-being program that combines ancient wisdom with modern behavioral science to help people build healthier habits to elevate their well-being. And actually, we see a little, just to the meditation we did this morning, we have the self there in the middle who's dragged down by the mind into this ocean of chaos. And what we're trying to do is rise above the chaos. So that's a little side note on the program there connected to that meditation that we did. Now, it was a brand new program, and I didn't know how to create awareness. What would be the best way to make people aware of what it is that this program is about? And so I looked at the research, and I noticed that there was not really a good framework how to structure that journey and how to measure what works best. So I took the best practices that I could find in the literature and tested a bunch of approaches. And we developed a framework called the 5E framework. Now, this is a representation of all the set of activities that you can do as a program manager, as a marketer, to optimize engagement. At the same time, it also represents a journey that the people that you seek to engage with, that they can go through from not knowing anything about you to becoming, to engaging in change, or ultimately becoming a raving fan. And this framework tells you how to optimize engagement at every stage of that process. And it helps you to pivot investments where they are delivering the best results. And I want to walk you through this framework by showing 2 campaigns that we ran and test them against each other, what works and what we did at each stage. Now, when we launched the program in 2021, February 2021, we had a couple of weeks of a launch, and we ran 2 campaigns. Campaign A was a free well-being event, 60-minute well-being training, after which we then encouraged people to engage in the program, buy the program. Campaign B was a scorecard, set of questions, where people get a well-being report that tells them how they could improve or maintain their well-being, and then afterwards they were invited to buy the full program. So the first step of this process is to expose people to your message. If there is no promotion, if there is no awareness, then of course there is no change, and we have seen that in Redland City Council, in Toowoomba, in Logan, all the koala awareness campaigns that must be done before you actually are able to see the change. So here we have your availability of promotional output on people's screens or in their physical environments, your ads, your blogs, your flyers, your radio ad, or the posters that are the first time that a person sees what it is that you're doing. Similarly, for many people of you, it's the first time that you see me speak or engage in this meditation that we did this morning. So this is the moment where you create that awareness. The next step, I'll explain how we did that for our campaign. Campaign A, the free event, for both campaigns, we had 2 social media ads. The first one for the free event was a video and invited people to register for the event, had 18,000 impressions. The second one for the scorecard was just a still image, asking people, hey, do you want your score on 6 essential well-being habits? Do the test here. And it had 26,000 impressions. Now, the second step then, of course, is you ask people to take some form of action. This is the first action that a person takes after being exposed to what it is that you put out. And here, it could be clicking on the ad, it could be visiting a website, it could be visiting a store, it could be attending a certain location where you have a conversation with a person. Here's where people now transition a little bit from being passive to getting a little interested in exploring what it is that you have to offer. And in our example, we did in both campaigns, we had a website. Campaign A had the opportunity to register for the event, and then Campaign B was the opportunity to register for that, to get access to the scorecard, the question list, and then get their report. And so Campaign A, 146 clicks on the website, and Campaign B, 878. Then the third step is to have people experience something about what it is that you have on offer. So this is a trial of an experience or a component of your product or your program where people have the opportunity to not really be fully invested, but just spend a little bit of time and money perhaps to get to know you a little bit better, or what it is that your program stands for. So the product trials, the demos, the recordings, the free event, the discovery calls, anything that provides people with that opportunity to dive a little bit deeper, to spend a few more minutes or hours perhaps with your offering. And this is essential because a lot of the work that we are doing is based on trust, and people don't really know what to expect. And so before people commit, they want to check you out. And so you have to facilitate those opportunities. Now, in our case, we had, of course, Campaign A, we had the free event itself, so 60-minute well-being training. 92 people signed up. And Campaign B was the scorecard itself. People answer these questions, and 218 people signed up for that. And actually, all the 218 people completed that scorecard versus the event. Only 92 people signed up, but only 44 attended the event. Then we get to where the magic happens. This is where everybody wants to be, right? We want to then distill that crowd, and we have seen in the earlier presentations as well, you start at the top with a lot of people are being aware of what it is that you're doing, the reach, the views, but then further down that hourglass, you have the clicks and the people that are actually engaging. It becomes less and less. But here's where we want people to be. We want to convert people into being, passive followers or consumers to being active participants. Or attendees, or however it is that you want to call them, where they make a purchase in the store or on the website, or they enroll in your program, or in example of a behavior change campaign is where they adopt the behavior. So they now change their behavior, they give up their old behavior, and they're now changing into a new behavior. And as we said, first, people need to be aware before they can engage. And so this is where you need to facilitate all those steps in order for people to get to that engaged level. In our case, we had a website where people could purchase the program and then enroll in the program. We had 12 purchases, and I won't tell you which campaign generated what purchase. I'll come back to that later. Then the last step in this process is endorse. This is continued engagement. You see some overlap with the model that Murooj presented before, but this is ultimately where we want to be. After we engage people, we want continued engagement. We want people to either repeat the purchase or continue performing that behavior, making it a lifelong behavior that is ingrained in their lifestyle, where ultimately we want people to become advocates, where they become the champion of the behavior or of the cause. And this is a critical step. If we want to create lasting change, we must never forget this. And how can we facilitate this opportunity? In a nutshell, because we launched a program for the first time, of course, we ask people for feedback. What did you think about the program? How did it change you? Did you have some positive results? And then people provided feedback, and we had good feedback that now we can use as a factor of trust for future participants to see, hey, other people actually like this. So they become the advocates, ultimately, that community, that change tribe that we're speaking of. So, as I said, you have that hourglass at the top. Lots of people are aware, but it goes slimmer and slimmer, where only a few people will actually take that decision to engage. But after they make that decision, traditional sales funnels, they stop at the bottom, and the sales guys always just think about, boom, as long as I have the sale, then it's done. Us, social marketers, people who want to create change, we don't think like that. We think there is a continued journey there, where people are continuing to engage and ultimately become advocates. And here is where we need to evaluate each step so that we can articulate or so that we can quantify which of the steps are most effective. And I mentioned some of these figures already. In campaign A, we had 18,000 views on that ad. We had 146 people click on it, 92 people registered for the event, and only 44, not only, but 44 showed up, so normal number. And then campaign B, 26,000 views, and then 878 clicks, 218 registrations, and 218 people that completed. Now, I have a question for you. Which campaign do you think led to the highest number of purchases? So for those who think that campaign A generated the highest number of purchases, please raise your hand. And those that think campaign B, please raise your hand. Okay, seems like a bit of a draw, but you're right. I think that most people lean towards campaign A, and that's correct. Led to 10 program purchases, and the other one just 2. Now, if we look at the conversion rate, we see that yes, we had 146 people click on the ad, but in the other one there was 878. You think like, bang, this one is much better. But ultimately, it comes down to what people do after being exposed to what it is that you do. And so we see a conversion rate of 11% based on the number of leads as opposed to the purchases. And then the return on investment on campaign A was 250%. So that's a good number. Whereas campaign B is 77%, so we did not break even. So we could say, hey, maybe that wasn't a good approach. So that's something that I want to leave you with, is that you need to know what to measure. When you're creating change, you're setting objectives. You're setting objectives. Let me just fix this first. You're setting objectives for what to achieve. You set out a destination and you're trying to figure out how to get there. What's the best way to do this? And in order to then demonstrate if you have reached the destination or if you have won, for example, if it was a success, you must know exactly what to measure. So rather than being, let's say, a little bit distracted by the vanity metrics that Facebook or all the social marketing or social media platforms put up and say, oh, you had this many views, you had this many likes or engagements. But ultimately, what does that mean? If people at the bottom or in the middle of the hourglass don't engage or don't change their behavior or don't engage with a program or service, then these vanity metrics are meaningless. So know what to measure, know what is important, then focus on what you control. So when you see that at each stage, you see, hey, this actually leads to higher number of clicks, this leads to more people visiting the website, this leads to more registrations, then you can see, if I turn this knob, if I increase the number of posts that we do on this particular, for this particular stage, or if we increase the investment on that particular front, or raise the partnerships, or whatever it is that you see that works, you dial on the knobs and then you focus on what you control to ultimately influence that engagement. And finally, it's important that you monitor as you go. You don't have to wait until the whole thing is finished and then see, what worked. You can try a bunch of things. And then as you go, you can test and see, did this work or maybe not? And then you can see what is effective in the early days. You can then double down on that. And so that is, in a nutshell, the 5E framework. And if you want to learn more about how to choose the right metrics, how to make these calculations, then tomorrow is a workshop at 1 p.m. or 3 p.m. And we will take a deep dive into this framework to show you how you can do that for your organization or for your work as well. Thank you very much. By the way, one quick question, thing. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, I put a lot of videos on well-being as well. And I hope to connect with you later on. Thank you.
He's trying to steal my clicker, which is really great. Thank you very much, Yannick. Questions for Yannick, please post them up into the channel, the Slido. I'm actually seeing quite a few questions coming through. This is the last speaker for this session, and we will do a little bit of a Q&A just before the lunch break. The question has come through from the room, will we have these slides available? And the answer for you all is that the full recording will be made available as fast as the team can actually manage that. At the moment it's completed, we will email them all to you. So don't feel you have to capture everything now. There's a lot, we know that. We throw a lot at you, allow you to go away, and then you can re-engage with the things that interest you and continue to have a conversation. Now I'm going to hand to our final speaker, Pete Cunningham. Come to the stage.
Thanks, Sharyn. Hello, everyone. I've got some bad news. The 2 workshops that I was doing tomorrow, I'm not going to do them because I want to go to Yannick's workshop. I thought his stuff was fantastic. I was going to go to your workshop. How are we going to do that? Okay, so first of all, I'd like to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the room and pay my respects to any elders past, present and emerging. A local elder that I've had a bit to do with in recent years, a fellow named Greg Eggett, tells us that this part of the Brisbane River has long been associated with learning and sharing, so it's great to be in a room with everyone continuing that tradition today. Now, this morning, when I got up early and I couldn't sleep and I was excited about today, and so I had a bath. And I never have baths, it was a stupid thing to do really. But in the bath, I thought about the fact that I was the 4th speaker in a session running into lunch. And that got me thinking about Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. And do you know that story he tells in there about the 8 Israeli parole judges? So there were 8 Israeli parole judges who worked 5 days a week, basically determining whether or not people can get out of prison or not. And within that process, every 6 minutes they had to make a decision. And what they found as they were going through that process was that the closer it got to lunch, or the closer it got to a food break, the less likely someone was to be released. And then, as a matter of fact, the norm was 35% release. Straight after a break, straight after some food, the release rate was 65%, and it decreased right through until the next break, where just before the next break, it was 0%. So thanks, Sharyn, for putting me on last. The next thing was that elsewhere in his book, he talks about how low blood sugar can impact your decision-making. And so Rosie and Hugo from Pitch Camp have got some snakes that they want to share with the group. Have you already got it? How did they do that? Fantastic. So we can get into it now. I'm going to talk to you today about authority. And authority is a key part of any presenter's armoury. And the fact is, these days, with scepticism rife and expertise everywhere and time being money, it's not easy to convince people in your audience of your bona fides quickly. So how can you do that? Well, the rise and fall of Boris Johnson can give us some answers. Authority took Boris Johnson to power. He echoed the concerns many Brits had around immigration and the need for a Brexit, and in doing so demonstrated a deep understanding of his audience. The electorate rewarded him for bringing that authority to the room and elected him Prime Minister of the UK. Then he broke that trust, lost that authority, and the rest is history. So today we have a private sector and a public sector full of professionals, professors, academics, researchers and practitioners who are all very similarly qualified. They all work for organisations with similar reputations, and many of them are very happy to sharpen their pencils to get whatever deal is on the table. So how does a potential collaborator, customer or funder differentiate between you and a peer when you're pitching your offering? Well, one opportunity is to rethink authority and to consider winning it rather than bringing it to the room. And what I'm going to put to you today is that if you rethink authority and genuinely commit to winning it with an audience rather than bringing it to an audience, you can set yourselves up for greater connections and the opportunity to better secure the outcomes you're looking for from the people that matter most. And I'm going to do that by touching on three things. The first thing, anyone from the social marketing at Pitch Camp workshops see this sort of agenda happening for you? Okay, so the challenge, and that's the challenge we as communicators face, the opportunity that not everyone is picking up on, and thirdly, what's involved for greater buy-in. The challenge. The challenge we as communicators face these days is that subject matter expertise, like we've already been seeing in the room today, subject matter expertise and an elevated position within a hierarchy are no longer enough to get the buy-in from the audiences that are important to you. And I'm going to start by we've had one show of hands today, I'm going to get another show of hands. Can I get a show of hands from anyone in this room who is an academic? Oh, very good. Anyone who's a researcher? Now keep your hands up, please. Anyone who's a researcher? Anyone who's got a PhD? Anyone who is involved in policy making or the delivery of policy? Anyone, keep your hands up. Anyone who leads a team? Okay, so there's a lot of people in this room with a lot of either subject matter expertise or vested authority from others. Now, can you keep your hands up, please? I know it's a stretch, but that's what the snakes are for. So there's a lot of subject matter expertise and vested authority. So I want you just to tell me, if that authority that you bring to a room always works for you when you need to take people with you. Keep your hand up if that authority you bring to a room always works for you when... they've all gone. Where did they go? Why is that? You know, you've got your data, you've done your research, you know the problem, you know the solution, and you're going to help a whole lot of people and people that are important to them. Why is it so hard? Well, the reality is things have changed, and it's no longer enough to bring your subject matter expertise to a room, and it's no longer enough to be the most elevated position in the room. You've got to work harder than that. And it's interesting for me, we're just going to have a look at a couple of the reasons why, and unfortunately, I don't have any research. These are all just observations. My heart sank in our group as each presentation got up and there was just all this research and proof of people's hypotheses on the things. These are just observations from 30 years of working in the advertising industry and selling ideas for a living. But what we found is that a traditional view of authority, I'm going to use one example, and that's my example. Grew up in Brisbane, in a very working class Catholic traditional family. And our authority structure was kids were to be seen and not heard, respect their elders. Mum and Dad had complete authority. They sat within a hierarchy within our community where the parish priest held sway, where the family doctor knew best, and the 6 o'clock news told us what we needed to know. If you had more, did more, or were more, you weren't to be argued with. Imagine how great that must have been for people in power back then. Fortunately, things have changed a little bit. So what's changed? Well, 3 things in my observations have changed. The first is that trust has been broken. Some people today have talked about trust. Trust has been broken. The second is that we've now been exposed to a whole lot more information and education, but in particular, we've got a lot more exposure to information. And the third is we've got a lot more choices. And this image here sums up for me the first 2 of those. Trust being broken and access to a lot more information. Now we know when people do things that aren't right, and people are held more to account. And a lot of the institutions that have been without question over the years are now coming into question. So that's changed. And then the second thing relates very much to your world. And I'm going to use this example. These are the universities I have access to in the Brisbane marketplace right now before I start looking at any sort of wider online offerings. As I grew up in Brisbane, there was one university, University of Queensland. There was no Griffith University, and there was an Institute of Technology. Now this is what school leavers, non-school leavers, potential postgraduates can choose from. So expertise is everywhere, choices are everywhere. So what's the opportunity against that backdrop? Well, the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, is to rethink authority and really commit to winning it with an audience rather than bringing it to an audience. And the way I want to start with that is the first rule that you'll hear in any presentation skills offering is your audience is the star of the show. The audience, this is a photo from the last in-person change event that you had. The audience is the star of the show. Oh, there we've got someone from there. There we go. Welcome back. Nothing's changed. Do you know, I saw your face in the crowd before. I thought, I know that face. I've been looking at it all bloody week. Anyway, so where was I? Yeah, the audience is the star. I don't get anywhere, A, if you don't show up, B, if you don't buy into my ideas. If I'm after you for funding and you say, no, I can't fund myself. So the audience has all the power. And the other thing around that is in the advertising industry, just to prove that point, more often than not, in a creative brief, the first 4 questions all relate to the audience. They don't relate to sales targets, they don't relate to product attributes or innovations, they relate to the audience. Who are we talking to? Where are we in their minds? What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the promise we offer them? And in particular, what's the problem we're trying to solve? It's not what's the global climate change problem we're trying to solve. It's not the koala problem we're trying to solve. It's not the drink driving problem we're trying to solve. The problem we're trying to solve is how do we get what's in that person's life that they want to change to do the things that we want them to do. I'm going to talk about that a lot more tomorrow in the workshops. Well, it'll be a recording of me because I'll be at Yannick's, but I'm going to talk about that a lot more tomorrow in the workshops if you want to know some more about that. The second thing I want to talk about is this guy here. This guy here is a fellow named Rich Howard. He is the founder of an organisation called the Howard Institute in Bethesda, Maryland, in the States. And you can see he's a very American-looking guy, great teeth, everything that you would expect from a person of authority in the United States. But the thing about the Howard Institute is that its base camp for... No, that's good. It's base camp for organisations that are looking to strengthen communities, and particularly vulnerable communities. And they've worked in places like Flint, Michigan. They worked at Newtown, Connecticut after the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre. They worked at the Mississippi Delta after Hurricane Katrina. And because they tackle some of communities' most challenging problems, they've had to come up with some of their most clever solutions. And Howard is really big on authority. And Rich in particular, when he talks about authority, he never talks about bringing authority, he talks about holding authority. And when he talks about holding authority, he says holding authority is your ability to go into a room of stakeholders, stand up on a table and tell them about themselves, their roles, their aspirations and their concerns, and have them believe you. So be in a position to get up on a table and tell those people about their roles, their aspirations, their concerns, and have them believe you. And I would encourage you to do that when next time you're thinking about going into a room with stakeholders. Could you do that? One of the things that we do when we're taking people through our pitch camp stuff is I get the attendees, the campers as we like to call them, I get them to ask themselves this question: what can you tell your audience about themselves and their situation that will make them want to know more about you and your offering? What can you tell them about themselves and their offering that will make them want to know more about you and your offering? Now, the thing about that is you can't do that until you've done your homework about the audience, and it really does encourage you to dig deeper. The good news is not many people are doing it. Lots of people get in and they talk about their product. We had that, and I'm sure the social marketing and Griffith members that are here today would agree with me that the temptation when we first presented a lot of our thinking in one of our sessions earlier was to talk about our world, to talk about the big picture problem we were trying to solve, to talk about all the macro issues, when really these guys were just, we saw it before. We've already seen what a great initiative the koala project is. Why doesn't everyone want to do it? These koalas, this national iconic symbol of being saved. Why doesn't everyone want to do it? Well, they don't want to do it because they've got other problems they've got to solve. And so you getting in and understanding their problems is going to give you an advantage in the marketplace. So the good news is if you commit to bringing winning authority in the room, you'll give yourself an unfair advantage. Okay, so what's involved? The beauty is there's not a whole lot involved. And most of you, I'd go as far as to say all of you, are in a position to act on it. First thing is your stuff. Somebody actually mentioned expert knowledge earlier today. Rich Howard says there's two types of knowledge: expert knowledge and public knowledge. I would add a third one to that, which is practitioner knowledge, which is some of the knowledge that people shared today. Kath and Sam from the councils, they've got all the expert knowledge around what to do with koalas. A big part of their lives is navigating their world, that practitioner knowledge. We know the right thing to do, but how do we get the funding? How do we take people with it? That practitioner knowledge. But in this world, knowing your stuff, you all do that, so I don't need to tell you too much about that. The second thing is public knowledge. That's another Rich Howard term, public knowledge. And that's the lived experience of the people whose lives you're trying to help, the people whose behaviours you're trying to change. What they've learned to do and believe. And we talk about that a lot more tomorrow if you come along. So know your stuff and know your audience. You get those two things right, then you get yourself to the point where you've got a sweet spot where your needs and their needs, and your strengths and their strengths, your aspirations and their aspirations, come together in that one little bit where you've got an opportunity to do something. That sweet spot. So knowing your audience and knowing your stuff allows you to find a sweet spot. Then what you've got to do is you've got to put it into a structure. And I'm not going to take you through this whole structure today, but the key thing is what you want people to take out of your presentation, how you're going to break that into some agenda items, what your key points around those agenda items are, how you're going to improve it, and then you worry about the creative opening at the start. When we do our pitch camp research and surveys, what we find is 9 out of 10 people go into our courses not knowing about structures for a presentation. What we find at the end of it is 100% of people say a structure has changed the way they will move into presentations into the future. Structure is an incredibly important part of this whole process if you want to be able to bring people with you. So, in summary, Boris Johnson won authority with his electorate by demonstrating a deep understanding of them. We looked at the challenge that exists, and the challenge that exists is that it's not enough to bring subject matter expertise and an elevated position within a hierarchy to the market. The opportunity is to win authority in a room rather than just bring it, because not everyone's doing that. And know your audience, know your stuff, and commit to a structure. That's all you have to do. And then I would say, each time, just ask yourselves, what can I tell this audience about their situation and their lives that will want them to know more about my offering and what I do? And if any of that interests you, we've got a summer camp happening. It's the usual 4-week course is squeezed into 2 weeks in January, which is great. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to ask my speakers to come forward. We've got a bucket load of questions and answers coming in. Pete, if you can just unmic first before you come forward with that. I think everyone else is ready to come forward. I'm going to shoot one question and then just grab one extra seat because Pete's going to need it. So just give me 2 shakes while we get all of that sorted as well. I counted my speakers and went, I have more speakers than chairs, which makes life really good fun. Okay, so a couple of questions came in for Anne-Marie and Janine. And there's a lot of questions now around comedic reproducibility. Thank you for giving me such a great term to have to try and say. So, what are your thoughts on behaviours that are not illegal? Can we use this notion and concept for things like unhealthy eating and sun safety?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes, you can. The real focus of this is on any behaviours where someone can intervene, right? So it would have to be something where it's a social or a public behaviour. So putting on did you say sunblock was one of them? Yeah, so putting on sunblock in a public area, yes, it could work. And eating in front of people, obviously not when you're eating by yourself, but.
So Anne-Marie, could you just perform the whole ritual dance again? Because that's the whole notion behind it. And then we'll just reimagine that for sunscreen and healthy eating.
Just puzzle time, but yeah.
That is fantastic. Okay, so Pete, on behalf of the people in the room who didn't get a snake, including myself, that's why you were last. But great.
Those snakes were meant for tomorrow's workshops, so sorry, workshop people.
Having said that, great idea, everyone loved it. All right, my next question actually comes through from Murooj, and there's a lot. So across all of you, I probably won't get through all questions here, but how do you track actions beyond social media engagement?
Hello? Yeah. It's a, it's a difficult one, but it's when you have data like what are people buying and how many people are coming into your store. Even Facebook now can track, based on your campaign, those who saw the campaign, how much out of these people actually came to your store. So you can use tools like that, or if you have secondary data like what I did with the vaccination uptake, you can use that as well.
That is fabulous, thank you. Yannick, this question's for you. Why did you shape it like an hourglass? Is there a sticking point between experience and engage?
I think I just touched on it a little bit. The reason we shaped it as an hourglass is because I mentioned before, traditionally people view it as a funnel and it stops at engage. And the reason we had the from experience to engage is because when that squeeze happens, there's at some point when people are asked to either change behavior or put down money to buy a program or a product, then all of a sudden they're like, they're hesitant and they may not follow through. And the reason we add the experience there is because then it is a unique opportunity for you to prepare people a little bit for that experience that they can expect. So rather than saying, hey, I'm Yannick, I build a well-being program, do you want to buy it? You know, it's like, maybe not so good. But if you go through, for example, the meditation we did this morning, you come to an event and you spend, that's what we showed in that well-being event. If people spend 60 minutes with me and I walk them through the process and gave them some unique insights, and hopefully I use a little bit of that talking about their situation, about, what is it that they are doing, to then demonstrate, hey, maybe this is something of value to you. And if not, then that's fine. But for a lot of people, apparently, that was more effective than doing a scorecard and asking these questions. So that answered that question. And yeah, of course, then after the bottom of the hourglass is where things continue to happen, where you want continued engagement and want to build that community of people around your idea or your brand or whatever it is.
Well, you just answered 2 questions in one. Thanks.
Sharyn, can I add something to that?
Yeah, go.
I thought that hourglass was fantastic. As someone who has sat through lots of funnel presentations, the hourglass I thought was fantastic.
This question is for Anne-Marie or Janine. So, I'll leave it to the two of you to decide who picks this one up. So what are some of the aspects or factors or elements of comedic reproducibility?
We're just trying to remember the scale because those are the aspects, but one of them is being able to use something from or I can use this advert to make a joke, I can use this advert to make someone else laugh.
Create humour. So
7?
it kind of captures whether they believe it can be used to relate to others as well as make people laugh. So,
so there's 7 items with that, yeah.
And did you test whether the ad was funny with the audience beforehand?
Yes, we did. So we did a pre-test of humorousness and comedic reproducibility before we conducted the full experimental study.
Thank you. Murooj, this question's for you. So the topic as to whether positive or negative was preferred, where does that all, give me a little bit more insight into shame versus hope and what you actually think in terms of some of the issues people work with in the room.
Yeah, of course. So there's some limitations around using shame. Even though it actually worked in that context, you have to think about the sometimes the defensive reactions that happen when you share a shameful message. And you don't want people to feel like they can't actually take action. They're just shameful and they sit there. And that also happens with hopeful messaging. So sometimes people, like with climate change action or environmental action, they are then left with a feeling of hoping for change rather than taking the action towards that change. So there's a lot of things to think about, and pre-testing is a great way to see how the audience are actually reacting or what they're doing after the message. I think that's maybe a little bit more insights around it.
Perfect. They'll give us more questions if they come. Pete, can you tell us the best ways to learn about your audience?
That's a good question. I think we've already seen the best way to learn about your audience here today. You've got to talk to them. You've got to be in amongst them. Just like the people at Logan and Redlands and Toowoomba and wherever else people are talking about koalas are, just like the researchers up the front here have been doing. There's no substitute for talking to people. You know, that how do you get up on a table and tell them about their concerns, their aspirations and their lives without actually asking and talking to them about those sorts of things? It's as simple as getting out amongst them. Give them candy. Yeah.
All right, Yannick, this one's a question for you. Do you want to just reflect a little bit? The questions come in saying, why did you call it 5 E's when you have another E, evaluate?
It was called 5E, and then I realized, hey, there's evaluate there. And I was like, should I change it to 6E? But I was like, no, 5 is a lucky number. So that's all there is. It's a thing that you do as a continuous step, as a continuous activity along each of the steps. So I thought maybe it's not a separate thing. It's embedded into the entire framework.
Beautiful. Thank you. Go.
By the way, while we're waiting, I just wanted to attribute some of the thinking in the hourglass to Dr. Timo Dietrich. It's not my idea. It's actually his idea, and we've just been refining this over years. And so I just wanted to properly, recognize, acknowledge Timo here. Thank you.
I just lost my train of thought. Must be that low blood sugar owing to lack of snakes. Tell you what. Okay. Are there any recycling examples of affiliate humour that you've come across?
I was thinking about, we've got a brand, I think, is it here in Australia? But they're using humour, but I'm not sure if it could be comedically reproducible because we haven't tested it. Oh, hi, sorry. Is that brand here? I think.
So it's a beauty brand, but everything is in a bar?
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you. And all cardboard packaging as well, so compostable.
Yeah, and they're using humour at the moment. It's a new campaign, and it's just started in New Zealand. I'm not sure. It might be here as well. And it is funny, and I was thinking about maybe, will they have some comedically reproducible aspects to it? But, yeah. What's the brand? Ethique, like it looks like...
It's spelled ETHIQUE. Yeah.
It is definitely
that, but there's potential to use it in that context, definitely.
Yeah. Yannick, this is a question for you. Do you want to just explain a little bit more about the difference between your A and B campaigns and just reflect on what you think drove the difference?
Yes, I'm happy to. I think, and I mentioned this before, when people spend, the more time people spend with your offering, whether it's free or paid for, the better of an idea they get in how valuable it's going to be for them. So in campaign A, we had the main experience was a 60-minute training. It lasted for a bit longer, but people got unique insights into how they could improve their well-being for free. Where the scorecard was just 5 minutes of answering questions. They got a report, very useful for some of them. For many of them, I had positive feedback, telling them what they did well and what they could do better. And it's just a shorter touch point. It's like, okay, cool, I have this report now, and then maybe that's enough for me and I want to move on. There was also people that were just looking for that, and perhaps they were not ready to change. Whereas the people that spend more time, that's 60 minutes, they realize, maybe I do need to change and this product can help me. And so, of course, in that event, we framed it so that people were encouraged to buy the program, whereas in the scorecard, it wasn't really like, a good way to frame that. It was more of a sudden ask, hey, do you want to buy this program? Even though we framed it a little bit, but not as effective. So I guess in conclusion, the more time people spend up front
before they engage with you, the more likely it is that there's going to be success.
And Yannick's work has also shown, and it's hot off press, but it's not big enough yet for us to know for sure. The longer they spend with you, the deeper they dive, the more behaviours change. So we're seeing it. It's a really strong correlation effect, and we just have to probably get up on the table and get some funders to give us some more money to really confirm it so that we can teach you how. So, Pete, this one is going to be curly. Why do we have to get on the table? That sounds pretty aggressive. Is there a better analogy?
You'd have to ask Rich that one, but he's worked in a lot of places where people are very sceptical, cynical, angry, and I think getting up on a table says, I'm here for you, I'm brave, I'm fearless, and I'm going to demonstrate that I genuinely understand you. So I think it's a good move by him. He isn't representative of the faceless people who make a lot of the policy decisions that are impacting people in vulnerable or problematic communities. So if I was you and you had a good read on your audience, give it a go.
Good work, Pete. Murooj, this one's for you. Do you think there would be a difference between behaviour, like a habitual behaviour, versus one-off action when using shame versus hope?
100%, yes. When you're asking people to do the behaviour multiple times and make it a habit, you're asking for more. So you definitely, I don't think just one emotion would work there. I think there's a lot of research backing the coactive appeal in that habitual or maintenance of a behaviour rather than just one appeal or one emotion in the message. So coactive appeals helps the audience to have less reactions or defensive reactions to a message, which helps you get through to them. So you're cutting through the noise, but you're also having a better recall, and therefore you're having a higher chance at engaging them throughout their behaviour.
Thank you. For Anne-Marie and also Janine, how do you segment for humour styles?
So there is a scale for that. So it's literally as you're doing your consumer insights that you're collecting before you pre-campaign creation, when you're collecting information about all of the target groups so that you're getting to know them, as we're saying. So one of the ways, obviously, you can do lots of kind of interactive, engaging, exploratory ways, like interviews or any other ways of kind of talking. Also, you can do surveys. So it would be a literal survey, and then asking other components as well to create a good picture of the segment and describe them well.
There's quite a bit of research going on in psychology, bringing out what these people are like and what they tend to do and other kind of associated attributes that they have. So I think we will get more knowledge over time as well about this group.
And while I've still got you both, is comedic reproducibility only relevant if there is a slogan or tagline that people will use in an intervention situation?
So we've seen it, anecdotally, we've seen it through sentences, like verbal things, but as well as action. So that hand action that I really couldn't do with puzzle time, but that's a hand action. So it can be, in amongst the other kind of earlier research, it could be a saying, of course, a slogan, a sentence, but it can also be a movement or a facial expression, but it has to be something that can be reproduced. So it just has to be something that you can see or you can hear, basically.
And we chose slogan and print advertising because it's much easier to control everything than, for example, the video advertising or, maybe movements. But future research that we will be embarking on will test further this concept. Yeah.
Can I jump in on that one? With my advertising hat on, what I would say to that question is the harder you try to come up with a slogan that people will say, the more likely you are to bomb. What you need to find is the humanity and the humour, and then people will own it, and it's only when they own it will they reproduce it. So that's where you've got to be really careful, I would suggest, is when we say, how do we do this for reproducibility, rather than how do we create something that's reproducible? They're two very different things.
Yannick, there was a question posed. What would you do differently going forward with your program?
I would run more events, and I would launch more frequently. So organize sections of the year, which I'm now in fact doing, to say, okay, this is where we're going to open, take an enrollment, and then close again. So where you have the scarcity element, where people's like, okay, do you want to get in? Then now's the time. And also run more events, be out speaking. I'm running well-being workshops at the university and other places, increase more of their presence with your audience and demonstrating, hey, this is something that may be of interest to you. And then give them the opportunity to then enroll and engage.
That is perfect. And with a final question, Pete, are there any more snakes?
Rosie? Sorry, thumbs down on that one. Lucky it's lunchtime.
So, from all of us, I would like you to just take a moment to thank our session 2 speakers. And from my team, Elena, I was very conscious that there were some snakes handed out in plastic. They have organised a box or a container, forgive me, I'm not sure exactly what. So at the door, as you exit, if you have finished your snakes, please dispose of the packaging there, and Elena's going to take it to a upcycling facility. So thanks again to the speakers. Enjoy your lunch break. We'll be back in an hour.